Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I have the distinct honor of having a new guest from Work Without Limits. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you.
I will not attempt to pronounce your last name because even though I've been practicing, I am not seasoned enough. So if you would like to introduce yourself officially and your title.
I'd be very happy to. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So my name is Kathleen Petkauskos, and I am the director of Work Without Limits. And we are an initiative out of Commonwealth Medicine, which is the Consulting and Operations Division of UMass Chan Medical School. So I'm very happy to be here.
I am delighted to have you. Before we started taping, we were talking about, because this is the first time we've met one another,
That's right.
my vision impairment, and you shared that you have an adult daughter who is visually impaired.
I do.
And we were talking about the resiliency and the intrepidness I call us VIPs, visually impaired people. I don't like the word blind because it just rubs me the wrong way. But I'm curious. We were talking about driving, and I would imagine, as a director of Work Without Limits, many times you might be able to find employment for someone, but the transportation barrier rears its ugly head. So tell us about your daughter, if you will, and how she navigated that, or how she addressed that.
Sure. I'd be happy to. So my daughter's name is Liz.
Of course.
Elizabeth. And we call her Liz. And she was diagnosed as an infant, 10 months old, as legally blind. So really has been, blind her whole life. She has 2200 vision corrected, which I believe is the definition of legal blindness. So she has too much vision to qualify for a seeing eye dog, but not enough that she can drive. So she's kind of in the middle there. Yeah, right. Kind of in the middle. She has some good, usable vision, but definitely, is a bit of a challenge. So she doesn't drive. She's never driven. We were talking about how for her that was sort of a developmental stage growing up that that she missed, and I think was hard for her because she didn't get to experience that independence and that freedom that a lot of her friends.
Right, it's a rite of passage when you're a teenager.
Yep, definitely.
And everyone focuses on that and talks about that, and you feel left out.
Yeah.
You feel left out.
Yeah. And it's definitely a challenge around employment as well, for sure. Trying to, might find an employer who wants to hire you, but you can't get there. It's not easy for you to get there. And certainly in the work that I do and over the course of my career, I've heard stories about people who go to the lengths, great lengths, just to get to employment. It could be 2.5 hour commute with, buses and trains and doing whatever they can to get there, because that's how important that opportunity is to them to work and to gain work experience, to gain employment. So, but transportation definitely is one of the main barriers and challenges, I think, for people with disabilities when it comes to employment.
Absolutely. So how did you
fall into this?
Yes, I was going to say attain this level of proficiency.
Well, I don't know about that, but so when I had my daughter, actually, I was a young mom, and I was looking for a job with mother's hours, and my mom actually was friends. My mom was a public school teacher, and one of her colleagues, who I knew, our families were friendly, was on the board of directors at this organization. in the town next to the one that I grew up in, and helped me to get an interview there. And it was a sheltered workshop, if you remember that term and
Yes.
those days. I never knew something like that existed.
Yeah.
But they had a part-time position for occupational skills instructor, 9 to 3. I got the job and just kind of went to school for physical therapy, actually, and I never worked in it. I ended up in employment and just kind of took it from there. Was promoted a couple of years later into the vocational evaluation position, got into job training and placement at an ARC in Framingham. That was really when I started to work with employers and businesses around employing people with disabilities, and really moving toward that trend, if you will, of moving people out of sheltered workshops and into competitive integrated employment. At that time, it was supported employment. We had job coaches and things like that on site, and then I just kept going from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a great beginning.
Was the sheltered workshop for visually impaired people, or was it for?
It was. There were people there who had all kinds of disabilities. I would say mainly intellectual and developmental disabilities. There were people there who had mental health disabilities, and there were probably some who had visual impairments, but I don't remember a big contingency of that. My recollection is probably not, and maybe it was one of their disabilities.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just again, my sight loss is adult onset, so for me, when I was living my sighted life, I had quote unquote heard about sheltered workshops, and particularly for the blind, like assembly work.
Yeah.
Putting boxes together.
That's correct.
Again, something that was repetitive, working with your hands, something that you did not need to see in order to accomplish. And I remember I was deemed legally blind in 2008, and I went to a convention for the blind in 2010. And again, I was hugely impressed by 3,000 visually impaired or blind people of all ages from all over the country. This was in Dallas, Texas, but also from all over the world. And this was a week-long conference, and there was a contingent of blind teachers, blind accountants, blind lawyers, blind. I was like parents of children who. Sighted parents of children who are visually impaired, visually impaired parents of sighted children. I was like, wow, like who knew? Yeah. But I remember during the part of the conference when we're naming delegates for the coming year, and each state has a contingent. One of the legal counsel for this organization had grown up in Colorado, and he had been told, because he had been in one of these sheltered workshops, and he had been told, well, you're never going to amount to anything else. This is the best that you can attain. And he said, oh yeah. And again, he had a support system around him, parents that were like, no, you can. We're going to support you, and we're going to expose you to to education, and look how far you can go. And I'm wondering, in your career, you've seen this shift from
absolutely
from almost like a altruistic or benevolent protection to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And once again, sheltered, right? You said protective, sheltered, right? They were called sheltered workshops, and there's definitely, especially in Massachusetts, sheltered workshops no longer exist in Massachusetts, so there's definitely been a trend away from them. And I do remember, I was very young and, new in my career, and it was a fantastic place to work. I loved working with the people. I loved the challenge of the live work and doing good quality of work and helping people to set goals and get better and, faster or their quality better, whatever it may be, and just interacting, engaging with the employees there that I was overseeing in my, my little section of that that workshop, but I also realized that people could do a lot more than what you were doing, because you're right. A lot of the tasks were very simple tasks. When you buy jewelry in those little white boxes with a little pad of cotton
Yes.
in them. Well, that was one of the jobs, just putting that little piece of cotton in there and putting the cover on and then packing them inside a box. I mean, very, very simple. And I could see that people had much more potential than that, and that they could do more. And while I was there, the organization hired a job placement person, and I thought, terrific. As the vocational evaluators, when people first came in, I, put people through a barrier tests and career interest inventories, and, just talk to them about what they wanted to do for employment, and, would write up a report on that and deliver that information to them and families and referring counselors, etc. But when the job placement position was created, I thought, that's great. Maybe we can do vocational evaluation in the community. That would be terrific, because that's really where people belonged, and they had the capability of doing that. But the organization wasn't ready to make that move when I was ready. So I actually left that organization, and I went to another organization where the job was job training and placement in the community. Because that's really, I guess at that time, that was what I had my eyesight on, and what I thought that people could do more of. And it was an education, again, it was an education. I remember one time when we had maybe 3 or 4 people going to this company to work, clerical type of task, putting together like flyers and mailings and that type of thing. And they got to work on a Monday and the company was gone. And come to find out, they never even paid our business office for the work that they did. And the reason, I can remember the owner saying to me, but shouldn't they, isn't it just good enough that they can work?
They don't need to be compensated.
And I was like, no, that's not how it worked. But I didn't know that the business office wasn't collecting the fee for their work. But they got paid by the organization, but not by the company. So, so we've come a long way, I think, over the years. Well, we're a much different place today, I think, from the corporate perspective.
Right. Well, so this is of interest to me as well, because I'm Adobe, which that stands for Disability-Owned Business Enterprise.
I know what that is, and I bet you it's not often that somebody knows what that is.
Well, exactly. But I'm frustrated because I can't seem to get traction. I mean, I've got the title, but I can't seem to get traction. So we'll have to, off camera, we'll have to talk about that.
Yes.
But what I find is that, people want to hear me speak about my experience, but then they don't want to pay for my expertise. And I'm not talking about being a lawyer. I'm talking about the trainings that I do, where it's immersion training, where I'm introducing individuals who are sighted into the world of the visually impaired, having them understand the challenges that there are. Again, I definitely want to work, but I often feel stymied. And again, I'm not intending this to be a gripe or complaint session, but I see the corporate world saying, nice job, Liz, and patting me on the head. But then when I'm like, well, give me an opportunity, and then they're like, well, yeah, it's not a good time. It's we do that internally. It's almost like, again, shutting their eyes and acting as though, well, we'll compliment you, but we don't want to compensate you, kind of a deal. And I'm wondering, do you feel, or have you witnessed that kind of tug of war where corporate America wants to do the right thing, and they want to sign on, and they want to pledge, we're going to hire some X amount of, differently abled people. And then they might actually do that, but then there's no traction. There's no, because the people themselves are like, this is a hostile work environment. I'm the only one. And the reason I say that, I remember I interviewed, and I won't say who it was, but someone who said, Oh, yes, we employ somebody who's visually impaired in, well, actually, this person did an internship. And I said, are you going to hire this person? Well, we're not so sure because, we don't know enough about, what kind of accommodations this person needed. The entity relied on the Commission for the Blind to set this person up. And this person is a very good worker, but we as the company are just very hesitant about actually, offering a job. Do you find that if you find employment that somebody does not have longevity in that employment? I'm just curious.
There's a lot there in your question.
I know.
So, first of all, I want to just say that when I was sharing the stories about the sheltered workshop and my own career and moving into more job placement of people with disabilities, that was in the 80s. Okay, so that was 30 years ago, and we have definitely come a long way since then. There are many, a growing number of companies that are strategically and deliberately, seeking out talented candidates with disabilities and bringing them into their companies and employing them and supporting them and, helping them to advance in their corporation. So I think, we have come a long, long way in 30 years. And I think, I'm very privileged, I think, and honored to be able to be part of Work Without Limits, where we do work with corporations around disability inclusion. We provide training and consulting to them, education, information, and resources, as well as we bring them together as a network so that they can share with each other what they're doing within their companies, what their successes are, what their challenges are, who their partners are, what's working, what's not. So, I get to see a lot of that in our state, but also can see it happening across the country as well. So I think it's very encouraging. The word is out, if you will, the secret is out, and companies are embracing it for a number of different reasons, many of them rooted in business and being competitive and having that advantage. They see it as a competitive advantage to them. But they're also openly sharing their successes with each other, even with their competitors, to bring them into the fold and to help them to do the same thing. So, all of those things, I'm happy to talk about them a little more, but there was something else that you mentioned, and now I'm forgetting what it was. About when companies, hesitate, if you will. Maybe they have an intern or something like that in, but then they don't make that commitment
Right.
to that person going forward. And you had mentioned where the company was saying, well, we don't really know how to accommodate them or what to do with them. And I think that, number one, the person needs to be qualified to do the job. They need to be able to do the job and be competitive in that role and all of that. But I do think that there's a lot to learn for companies. And I think one of the things that they need to learn is that they don't have to know everything, right? So we had partnered with the Carroll Center for the Blind once, and we had conducted an education session for employers that came in to learn. And a gentleman there did a demonstration of the different assistive technologies that he uses on a daily basis. So how to count money, how to dress, how to travel, how to use Excel and Outlook and Word and, all of that. It was a terrific demonstration. And the reaction from the employers in the room were, oh, we don't have to know it.
Right.
You know it. So I think there is some fear there from employers and maybe some misunderstanding that they need to know that side of the equation inside and out when they don't. The candidate or the employee comes with that information. They're using those technologies every day to navigate their own world. And there are supports, like you said, the Mass Commission for the Blind and others that can come in and assist with that. So I do think it's a myth or, a fear, and it's false that companies don't have to know everything.
you're reminding me a couple of years ago, I'm an elder law attorney in addition to being a real estate attorney, in addition to being a realtor, in addition to being all of these, my pedigree. Anyway, I was up at a senior living community, and I had been dropped off, and again, I'm unabashed. I use my white cane. I was very self-conscious at first, but now it's my white cane is my just my tool of independence. Anyway, the activity director came out and she said, "How did you get here?" And again, it was kind of like an interrogation, and I said, "A vehicle." I was like, "Is this a trick question?" And the reason she was asking, she had an intern from one of the local colleges. This was here in Worcester, and this young woman was a senior and was visually impaired and wanted to work with the senior community, but there was, again, this misunderstanding on the part of the director of activities, and the reason I'm bringing this up is the lack of skills for the young woman, because she had never had to advocate for herself. Yeah. She was still, 21, 22 years old, so she was still getting the services from the Commission for the Blind. Yeah. And the reason the activity director asked me, about transportation, because this young woman was very close, going to school, very close to this, to the senior living community. But yet the young woman had thought, well, they're going to provide me transportation. And of course, the activity director said, well, no, you've got to get here on your own accord. So there was this gap between the two. And ultimately, I had talked to this young woman's professor, and he said, well, doesn't the Commission for the Blind do that? Again, there was these, like you said, presumptions that, somebody else is going to do it, or somebody else is going to do it. And to your point, everybody has a role. The social service agencies, the individual, and businesses or society. Everybody needs that awareness and information. And again, if there's a gap, well, how do we fill this gap? As opposed to saying, well, and unfortunately, that's what happened with this young woman. They ended up not hiring her because they felt she's got a long way to develop these skills. And again, it was tragic. To me, it was tragic. And the young woman, the activity director asked her if she would be willing to talk to me, and I said, because it turned out we had the same diagnosis. Yeah. And again, she was born legally blind, and she was very shy about using the cane because she didn't want people to know. And again, I get it. I get it. Yeah. Because you're very self-conscious. Yeah. So again, in your position, I would imagine that this is not an infrequent occurrence. And again, how do we get everybody working together so that there can be the successes that really everybody, that's everybody the desire wants. That's the objective, right?
That's what everybody wants. So, I mean, you're right. There can be a lot of misunderstanding, and everybody has different perspectives and roles. And I definitely think that the job candidate or the employee needs to know what their rights are, but what their responsibilities are as well. Because employers know, they have that information. They know the Americans with Disabilities Act inside and out. And individuals need to know that as well, so that they can advocate for themselves. And maybe it's a little additional responsibility that they have to be able to do that, where maybe somebody else may not have to. But to get to a point where they feel comfortable advocating for themselves and talking about themselves and disclosing their disability and what accommodations what they might have, and kind of demystifying it for the employer, because if it's not discussed or talked about, they may not, they may never get to that resolution, if you will. So, and so many things that you've brought up is just triggering so many things in my mind. A lot of the things around my daughter and her experiences, I can always, like when you share stories, I can relate to some of her experiences in that regard. But also at Work Without Limits, mainly what we do, we actually don't do job placement of people with disabilities. So we work with employers and businesses to help build their capacity to successfully employ people with disabilities and give them the confidence and the information and the resources that they need, so that when an organization like the Carroll Center for the Blind knocks on their door to do business with them, they feel like they're in a position to do that. They've done their internal work. They've trained their managers, their human resource personnel, their associates. They've made sure that they're accessible, that their website's accessible, their technology, etc. So we do that. We do provide benefits counseling to individuals with disabilities and their family members. And I think that's important to get out there as well. And that is basically helping people to understand how working and earning money will affect eligibility for public benefits, such as Social Security, disability, subsidized housing, food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare. So we work with over 75 organizations in the state in providing that discrete service to help people to move forward in making decisions toward training and employment. But we don't actually do the job placement piece of it. Maybe that's a little fallacy that's out there.
Well, I think again, I think you've switched from, earlier in your career working with the individuals to now working with the companies and putting the two together.
That's correct. And when we built Work Without Limits in 2008, we made a decision not to compete with organizations in our state that are already doing a great job of helping to support people in their job search and their transition into employment. We wanted to create programming that filled gaps. And that piece was really building the capacity of the employers and helping to educate them and helping them to feel, comfortable and confident in their space. And then that benefits planning piece of it is very important too, because next to transportation, that's another main barrier to employment for people with disabilities, getting over that fear of losing that security of that Social Security check every month. It may not be much, but they know they get what day they get it. It comes every month, and they depend on it, and absolutely. They don't want to upset that.
Absolutely. Well, Kathy, this has been enlightening for me, and I definitely want to pursue the Dobie.
Actually,
you know what that is.
Yes, we can have that conversation.
Sure. And thank you for I can just tell you were very inquisitive, and your mind, there's like little sparks. That I love that characteristic of you. It's like, what about that? What about that? So
there's a lot to talk about.
Exactly. So thank you so much for being my guest today on Connecting the Dots.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Join me next time for another edition of Connecting the Dots.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at lisbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Liz Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, J.D., LLM, in association with Compliments.